Do you know that some of the biggest victories in world history were never victories at all? What if the heroic war stories you grew up hearing were carefully edited, rewritten, and censored to hide fear, failure, and mass death? And what if the real enemy in the world wars was not always on the battlefield, but sitting behind desks, inside government buildings, deciding what the public was allowed to believe? This is not a conspiracy theory. These are documented lies. Official statements that were later exposed as false, losses hidden from families, defeats renamed as success. Once you hear this, you won't see war the same way again. Every war needs soldiers, but every war survives on something more powerful than weapons. Belief. Belief that the war is necessary. Belief that victory is close. Belief that sacrifice is noble. Governments don't just fight wars with guns and bombs. They fight wars with stories. And during World War I and World War II, those stories were often lies. No government tells its people the full truth during war. Not the winners, not the losers, not even the ones who later call themselves the good guys. World War I was sold as a short and glorious conflict. British newspapers promised soldiers would be home by Christmas. German leaders spoke of unstoppable power. French propaganda showed smiling men marching confidently to battle. The reality was something else entirely. Trenches filled with mud, rats, disease, and corpses. Men lived for months next to dead bodies. Entire generations were wiped out, but the public was never told that. In 1916, the Battle of the Somme began. British officials called it a success. On the first day alone, the British Army suffered 57,000 casualties. That was the bloodiest day in British military history. The public never heard that number. Newspapers printed optimistic headlines. Photographs of mangled soldiers were censored. Families received letters praising bravery, even when commanders knew the attack had failed completely. Because if the public knew the truth, recruitment would collapse, and the war would end not with victory, but with rebellion. Governments didn't lie randomly. They built systems to control reality itself. In the United States, a government agency was created for one purpose only: persuasion. Posters, films, speeches, newspapers, all carefully designed to turn war into patriotism and doubt into treason. Questioning the war became suspicious. Criticizing it became dangerous. Free speech quietly disappeared. In Germany, propaganda blamed internal enemies for military setbacks: Jews, socialists, journalists. That lie didn't just justify the war, it planted the seeds for something far worse. By World War II, propaganda had evolved. Radio, cinema, newsreels. Truth was no longer what happened. Truth was what people were allowed to see. In 1942, the United States suffered devastating losses in the Pacific. The government did not deny it. They simply didn't talk about it. Families were never told the full scale of deaths. Defeats were called temporary setbacks. Enemy strength was publicly underestimated to prevent fear and panic. At the same time, in Nazi Germany, citizens were told the war was under control. Retreats were described as strategy. Mass casualties were hidden. Foreign radio was banned. Listening to the wrong broadcast could get you executed. German soldiers were freezing and starving on the Eastern Front, dying by the hundreds of thousands. Back home, people were told victory was inevitable. Here is something almost no one talks about. Governments intentionally hid how many of their own people died. Not enemy deaths, their own citizens. Because grief turns into anger, and anger turns into resistance. The Soviet Union lost an estimated 27 million people. Citizens never heard the real number. The United States delayed full casualty reports until after the war. Japan hid the true destruction of firebombings even before the atomic bombs fell. People were dying in numbers too large to process, so governments reduced them to statistics or erased them completely. War also needs heroes, so governments created them. Stories were exaggerated. Failures were reframed as bravery. Lost battles became moral victories. Some soldiers were turned into legends not because they changed the war, but because their stories were useful. Heroes distract from mistakes. They make people emotional instead of rational, and emotional people don't ask questions. Behind the scenes, governments studied psychology. They wanted to know how much truth the public could handle. The answer was simple: not much. Fear lowers productivity. Grief slows factories. Truth causes protests, so lying became policy. Not always because leaders were evil, but because they believed the truth would end the war effort. And once lying works, it becomes addictive. When wars end, governments promise honesty, but the lies don't disappear. They move into textbooks, into movies, into national myths. Entire generations grow up believing their country fought cleanly, bravely, perfectly. Decades later, documents are declassified. By then, the people responsible are dead, and the story is already written. Here is the most uncomfortable truth. Propaganda does not end when war ends. It evolves. Different enemies, different language, same strategy. Fear, unity, selective truth. If you think governments stopped lying after World War II, you haven't been paying attention. The next time you hear, "This war is necessary," "This sacrifice is worth it," or "We are winning," ask yourself one question: winning for who? Because history doesn't just hide lies, it rewards them. The dead know the truth. The living inherit the story.